Nobody believes in you. Fine. But here's the question your ego does not want to answer. Have you given them enough evidence to be wrong? There is a dangerous difference between being underestimated and being unproven. And ambitious men confuse the two all the time. Your family sees your history. Your friends see unfinished plans. The market sees no results yet. You see potential. But potential is private information. And if you spend the next 5 years demanding recognition before building proof, their doubt will not destroy you. Your dependence on their belief will. There are 3 stages every unsupported man passes through. First, he wants people to believe in him. Then he becomes angry that they do not. And if he survives both stages, he discovers something far more useful. Belief was never the asset. Evidence was. That is the mechanism most men miss. They think confidence must come first. They think support must come first. They think someone needs to recognize the future version of them before they can become that man. No. There are 7 rules for building when belief is absent. But the first rule will attack your pride, because before you can become undeniable, you must stop demanding credit for a man who does not exist yet. Howard Schultz learned this long before Starbucks became an empire. When Schultz wanted to build an Italian-style coffeehouse business, the original Starbucks owners did not fully embrace his vision. He left and tried to raise money for his own concept, Il Giornale. Schultz later recalled approaching 242 prospective investors. Most rejected him. Not one rejection, not 10, more than 200. The pressure was simple. Either his idea became something the market could touch, or it remained a story inside his head. He kept pitching, he raised the capital, he opened Il Giornale. That operating business later became part of the vehicle through which he acquired Starbucks. That was his first meaningful proof, not becoming globally famous, not becoming wealthy, a functioning store, customers, revenue, reality. And notice something important. The lesson is not that everybody rejected Schultz. They did not. Starbucks itself was an early investor. The lesson is colder. The people who reject your future do not get to decide whether the future works. Reality does, but reality demands evidence. And if you keep replacing evidence with explanations, the next 5 years can disappear while you remain exactly where you are. Only older, more bitter, more fluent in excuses, more skilled at describing the life you never built. So, begin here. Rule 1. Stop demanding credit for potential. Potential feels powerful because you experience it internally. You know what you could become. You know how hard you could work. You know the business you could build, the body you could create, the skill you could master, the money you could make, the man you could become if your discipline finally matched your imagination. But nobody else can inspect that. To them, potential is a claim. And this is where ambitious men become emotionally weak. They believe, if people really understood me, they would support me, maybe. But the world is not morally obligated to price an unproven future as though it has already arrived. That sentence should not humiliate you. It should liberate you. Because if respect depended entirely on whether your family understood you, you would be trapped. If opportunity depended entirely on your friends believing in you, you would be trapped. If your confidence depended entirely on someone else seeing the man inside your head, you would be owned by people who may not have the imagination, incentive, or courage to see beyond your current position. Proof can be built. A portfolio can be built. Strength can be built. Revenue can be built. Competence can be built. Reputation can be built. But potential cannot be forced into another person's eyes through explanation. This is why explaining your ambition often makes you look weaker. You think you are clarifying the vision. They hear desperation. You think you are defending your future. They hear a man trying to borrow status from a result he has not produced yet. You think if you just explain it one more time, they will finally understand. But explanation without evidence becomes a public confession that you still need permission. So stop asking why they do not see what you could become. Ask a better question. What can I produce that makes the argument unnecessary? That is where power begins. Not in being understood, in becoming measurable, not in being encouraged, in becoming undeniable, not in convincing the room that your future is real, in creating enough evidence that the room has to update its judgment or reveal its blindness. This is the first wound your ego must survive. You are not owed belief for the man you imagine. You are owed the consequences of what you repeatedly prove. And that creates the next problem. Because even after you start improving, the people closest to you are often the slowest to notice. Rule 2. Understand. Why familiar people doubt transformation. Your family does not see you with fresh eyes. Neither do old friends. They possess a historical database. They remember when you quit. They remember the business that went nowhere. They remember the diet you abandoned. They remember the promises you announced too early. They remember the months you wasted. They remember the weaker version of you. So when you say, "I am different now," you are asking them to judge tomorrow. But all of their evidence comes from yesterday. This is why arguing with them usually fails. You are not fighting their opinion, you are fighting their memory. And memory is stubborn because it feels like proof. Machiavelli understood this problem centuries ago. Writing about men confronting a new political order, he observed that people do not readily believe in new things until they have had a long experience of them. That principle extends far beyond politics. Familiarity creates inertia in perception. People build a model of you. Then they protect that model until repeated evidence makes it expensive to maintain. You may hate this, but it is useful. Because once you understand it, you stop wasting energy trying to verbally update people who require visible evidence. Do not say, "I am serious this time." Show 30 completed workouts. Do not say, "My business is going to work." Show your first paying customers. Do not say, "I am becoming disciplined." Show 90 days without disappearing. Do not say, "I am learning a valuable skill." Show the project, the portfolio, the case study, the result, the output. Your argument is weak because words can be produced instantly. Evidence has a cost. That is exactly why it carries weight. Any man can speak with intensity for 5 minutes. Very few men can produce receipts for 5 months. Any man can announce that he is changing. Very few men can make change visible when nobody claps. This is where your pride must become practical. Your family may not believe you because they are cruel, or they may not believe you because they have watched you start and stop too many times. Your friends may not take you seriously because they are jealous, or they may not take you seriously because your current life gives them no reason to fear being wrong. The weak man hears that and collapses into shame. The strategic man hears that and becomes precise. He stops begging for recognition. He starts building a new data set. If you are the right viewer, stop false progress. You already know the problem is not that nobody understands you. The real problem is that your private ambition has not yet become public evidence, and if that does not change, another year will pass with nothing to show except better explanations. On Patreon, I go deeper into the private frameworks behind proof, positioning, discipline, leverage, self-command, and the systems that turn effort into visible power. It is not for men who want comfort, and it is not for men addicted to theory. It is for men ready to build evidence where excuses used to live. The decision is yours. Now listen carefully. Being doubted is painful. Being underestimated can sharpen you. But being unproven is different. Being unproven means the world may not be attacking your destiny. It may simply be waiting for proof. That realization can either crush you or free you. It crushes the man who needs to feel special before he works. It frees the man who is ready to turn every doubt into pressure. And when belief disappears and the room becomes quiet, another danger appears. Isolation. Rule 3. Turn isolation into structure before it turns into resentment. There is a romantic lie in masculine self-improvement. Being alone makes you stronger. No. Being alone gives you unused space. What you do with that space determines whether it strengthens you or destroys you. Unstructured isolation becomes rumination. Gaming, porn, doom-scrolling, endless YouTube. Imaginary arguments, revenge fantasies. Watching successful people while convincing yourself you are preparing to become one. Eventually, resentment begins masquerading as philosophy. You tell yourself nobody understands you. Maybe they do not. But if isolation produces nothing, misunderstanding is not your biggest problem. Your structure is. A man alone with no structure does not become dangerous. He becomes distracted in private. He becomes emotionally dramatic in silence. He becomes a prisoner of his own thoughts, walking around with a war in his head and no evidence in his hands. This is why some men spend years calling themselves lone wolves, while their bank account, body, skill level, and reputation remain unchanged. They were not building in silence. They were disappearing. Do not romanticize disappearance. Solitude becomes power only when it produces assets. So, give solitude a job. Fixed waking time. Training block. Income block. Skill block. Shutdown ritual. Weekly review. Make the behavior specific enough that your weaker self cannot negotiate with it. Do not say, "I will work on my future tonight." Say, "At 7 in the evening, after dinner, my phone leaves the room and I work on sales for 60 minutes. Do not say, "I need to get in shape." Say, "Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I train before the day has a chance to steal my will." Do not say, "I should learn something useful." Say, "Every weekday, before entertainment, I create one measurable output connected to one skill." Your future should not be left to the mood you have after work. Your ambition should not depend on whether you feel inspired at the exact moment your body wants comfort. Do not make your weakest emotional state negotiate with your future every evening. Decide before weakness arrives. Psychologists studying implementation intentions found that if-then plans, deciding in advance when and how a behavior will happen, consistently outperform vague intentions. A major meta-analysis covering 94 tests found a meaningful positive effect on goal attainment. That matters because your problem is not only motivation, your problem is negotiation. Every vague plan creates a court case inside your mind. Should I work tonight? Should I train tomorrow? Should I start after I feel better? Should I wait until the environment is perfect? Should I rest because I have been stressed? And because the tired version of you is often the judge, weakness wins the case. Structure removes the trial. It makes the decision before emotion enters the room. That is why disciplined men look cold from the outside. They are not emotionless. They simply stopped giving every mood a vote. Now something begins to change. Your isolation starts producing competence. Your evenings stop disappearing. Your body starts carrying proof. Your skill begins to sharpen. Your attention becomes harder to steal. But competence creates no power until you choose the right battlefield. Because one of the greatest mistakes ambitious men make is trying to prove their entire identity at once. They want to prove they are smart, disciplined, talented, special, misunderstood, different, capable of greatness. That is too abstract. Nobody can measure your entire identity, so stop trying to prove the whole man. Prove one capability. Rule 4. Build one skill nobody can argue with. Can you sell? Can you write? Can you code? Can you edit? Can you design? Can you negotiate? Can you analyze? Can you lead? Can you lead? Can you create demand? Pick something useful enough that improvement produces consequences, not something that merely makes you feel productive. Something the world can measure. Something that can create money, status, leverage, access, distribution, or opportunity. This is where fantasy begins to die, and that is a good thing, because fantasy lets you remain impressive in your own imagination. Skill forces you into contact with reality. Reality gives feedback. Feedback bruises your pride. Pride either breaks or becomes discipline. That is the path. This is where Elon Musk's SpaceX gives us a brutal example. Falcon 1 failed on its first launch, then failed again, then failed a third time. 3 attempts, 3 failures. At that point, speeches about potential were nearly worthless. The rocket either reached orbit or it did not. There was no motivational quote that could replace the result. There was no explanation that could make the vehicle successful in the eyes of reality. SpaceX responded with another launch. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1's 4th flight reached orbit, becoming the first privately developed liquid-fueled launch vehicle to achieve that milestone. Pressure. 3 consecutive failures. Action. Identify the technical problems, rebuild, launch again. First undeniable evidence. Orbit. Power lesson. 1 verified result can change the meaning of years of doubt. Later that same year, NASA selected SpaceX's Falcon 9 and Dragon system for a commercial cargo resupply contract worth at least $1.6 billion. Do not distort the story into a fairy tale. SpaceX already had a NASA relationship before Falcon 1 succeeded. One launch did not magically create everything. The real lesson is stronger. Credibility accumulates when claims survive contact with reality. That is what you need. Not a speech, not another promise, not a more emotional explanation of your pain. You need contact with reality. Your version of orbit may be smaller. Your first $1,000. Your first 100 customers. Your first 10,000 views. Your first promotion. Your first transformation photo. Your first finished portfolio project. Your first case study. Your first client result. Your first offer that a real person pays for. Your first body of work that makes a competent person stop and look twice. Do not despise small proof. Small proof is where a new identity first becomes visible. The man who needs applause hates small beginnings because they expose him as unfinished. The strategic man respects small beginnings because he understands compounding. One proof creates self-trust. Self-trust creates consistency. Consistency creates skill. Skill creates visible results. Visible results create reputation. Reputation creates leverage. Leverage creates options. Options create freedom. But the chain begins with one capability, one battlefield, one skill that nobody can argue with. Stop trying to become respected in every dimension at once. Become dangerous in one dimension first, then expand. And once you finally develop ability, another problem appears. Some men build skill, but they hide the evidence. They call it humility. They call it moving in silence. They call it not needing validation. Sometimes that is wisdom. Sometimes it is fear wearing a noble mask. Because proof that nobody can see often functions like proof that does not exist. Rule 5. Build quietly, document aggressively. Strategic silence does not mean invisibility. Do not confuse them. You do not need to announce the seed, but once the tree grows, document the tree. Portfolio, metrics, case studies, before and after results, screenshots, testimonials, published work, performance records, revenue. These are not decorations, they are evidence. A man who builds in private but never makes his value legible will eventually resent the world for failing to recognize what he refused to show. That resentment feels noble because it sounds like humility. But sometimes humility is just fear of judgment. Sometimes moving in silence is just hiding from the marketplace. Sometimes refusing to document your work is not depth, it is avoidance. Machiavelli wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. His subject was political perception. But the modern lesson is simple. People respond to what they can observe. You may hate that. It remains true. The world does not reward hidden value with the same force that it rewards visible value. The market cannot pay for work it cannot see. A potential ally cannot recommend proof you never show. A client cannot trust competence that has no record. An employer cannot negotiate with results you never frame. An audience cannot share transformation that remains locked inside your private life. This is why the most talented invisible man can lose opportunities to the merely competent man whose value is legible. The invisible man says, "I should not have to show everything." The strategic man says, "I will control the evidence available to perception. Do not complain about perception, govern it." A result without documentation is fragile. A result with documentation becomes a weapon. A workout becomes a transformation record. A client win becomes a case study. A learned skill becomes a portfolio. A solved problem becomes a public signal. A repeated pattern becomes reputation. This is not vanity when done correctly. Vanity says, "Look at me." Evidence says, "Look at what was done." Vanity demands attention. Evidence makes attention rational. There is a difference. Science gives you another reason to document. A meta-analysis of 138 studies involving 19,951 participants found that interventions encouraging people to monitor their progress improved goal attainment. The effects were stronger when progress was physically recorded or reported. That matters because documentation does not only persuade others, it disciplines you. A scoreboard exposes fantasy. A weekly review interrupts self-deception. A record of output forces you to confront the gap between what you said and what you did. Most men do not actually fear failure as much as they fear measurement, because measurement removes poetry. It does not care how tired you were. It does not care how misunderstood you felt. It does not care how much potential you believe you have. It asks one brutal question: what exists? That question will save you if you are strong enough to answer it. Every Sunday, ask yourself, what did I promise? What did I finish? What evidence exists? Where did I fail? What changes next week? Do not judge yourself by mood. Judge the system by output. Your mood will lie. Your imagination will exaggerate. Your pride will defend you. Your resentment will blame others. But the evidence will tell you where power is actually being created. This is where a man begins to separate himself from the crowd. Not because he feels superior, because he becomes harder to fool. He no longer needs a perfect emotional state. He has a system. He no longer needs constant praise. He has records. He no longer needs to announce that he is changing. The evidence begins to speak. But there is a trap here. After being unsupported for years, some men become addicted to independence. They stop asking for approval, but they also stop accepting useful alliances. They were dependent before. Now they become proudly isolated, and they call both states strength. Neither is strength. Rule 6. Find allies through value, not neediness. The final goal is not, I need nobody. That is wounded pride pretending to be sovereignty. Listen carefully. A man who says he needs nobody often still organizes his entire identity around the people who did not help him. He rejects guidance because receiving it feels like weakness. He avoids rooms where he could learn because beginner status threatens his ego. He refuses to ask intelligent questions because he has confused help with humiliation. Then he calls himself independent while remaining trapped inside the limits of his own ignorance. That is not power. That is isolation with better branding. Machiavelli understood alliances, incentives, reputation, and dependence better than almost anyone. The strategic question is not whether you need people. You do. The question is what kind of relationship you are entering. Neediness says, believe in me because I need help. Value says, here is what I can contribute, and here is what we can build together. Those are completely different positions. The needy man enters the room carrying emotional hunger. He wants rescue. He wants someone to see his pain, validate his ambition, give him direction, open doors, and repair years of neglect. But competent people can smell that hunger. They may not despise it, but they will not build serious alliances around it. Because neediness creates liability. Neediness asks for energy before offering value. Neediness makes another person responsible for your emotional stability. Neediness turns every unanswered message into a wound. Neediness makes you easy to manipulate because you are desperate to be chosen. Value is different. Value enters with evidence. Value respects the other person's time. Value asks sharper questions because it has already done the basic work. Value helps before demanding access. Value does not beg to be carried. It makes cooperation profitable. This is how you build alliances without losing dignity. Do not message a competent person saying, "Can you mentor me?" That is vague. That is heavy. That asks them to adopt your uncertainty. Instead, show useful work first. Say, I studied your last 10 videos. I noticed 3 moments where retention may be dropping. I made a short document with suggested cuts and stronger re-hooks. Use it if it helps. Or say, I saw that your landing page has a weak transition from pain to offer. I rewrote one section. No obligation. I thought it might be useful. Or say, I am building in this space. I have already completed these projects. I have one specific question about the next bottleneck. That is different energy. That is not a man begging for rescue. That is a man presenting evidence. Find competent people, useful people, reliable people. People whose incentives can align with yours. Then become valuable enough to deserve reciprocal access. Help before demanding help. Ask intelligent questions. Keep promises. Demonstrate competence. Follow up with proof. A powerful network is different from dependency. Dependency says, without you, I cannot move. Alliance says, together we can create more leverage. Dependency makes you smaller. Alliance expands your reach. Dependency comes from lack. Alliance comes from contribution. This distinction matters because unsupported men often fall into 2 childish extremes. First, they beg to be believed. Then, after enough rejection, they declare that they need nobody. Both are controlled by the same wound. Both are still organized around approval. The first man chases it. The second man performs immunity to it. But the strategic man does neither. He builds enough internal structure to stand alone. and enough external value to cooperate from strength. That is the balance, not dependency, not bitterness, leverage. If you are the right viewer, stop confusing isolation with power. You already know that learning alone, thinking alone, and suffering alone will not automatically make you stronger if nothing measurable is being built. The deeper system is on Patreon, where I break down private frameworks for proof, positioning, discipline, funnels, leverage, self-command, and how to turn invisible effort into visible power. It is not for men who want to watch more content while staying the same. It is for men who are ready to build a system around the man they claim they want to become. The decision is yours. And eventually, if you follow the first 6 rules long enough, you reach the final rule. This is the one that changes your identity completely. Because at first you want belief, then you want revenge. Then, if you become truly dangerous, you want neither. Rule 7. Build until belief becomes irrelevant. At the beginning you say, "Please believe in me." That is the dependent stage. You want your family to understand. You want your friends to take you seriously. You want someone to confirm that the future you see inside yourself is not fantasy. Then pride takes over. You say, "I will prove all of you wrong." That stage feels powerful. It can create movement. It can give you fuel. It can help you survive the first dark stretch. But do not mistake it for freedom. Because when your ambition is built around proving them wrong, they are still in control. They are still the audience inside your head. Their disbelief still gives your work emotional meaning. Their judgment still decides whether you feel powerful or humiliated. Their imaginary reaction still sits in the room while you train, work, build, and suffer. That is not sovereignty. That is dependency wearing armor. Real freedom arrives at the 3rd stage. Your verdict no longer changes the work. That sentence is the identity destination. Not because you are numb, not because you hate people, not because you have become cold in some childish way, but because your standard has become stronger than their opinion. You no longer require applause to continue. You no longer require doubt to feel motivated. You no longer require an enemy to produce discipline. You work because the work is tied to the man you have chosen to become. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who relies entirely on fortune is lost when it changes. The same strategic principle applies to approval. If your discipline depends entirely on encouragement, you collapse when encouragement disappears. If your confidence depends entirely on applause, you collapse when the room becomes silent. If your ambition depends entirely on proving someone wrong, what happens after they finally admit you were right? Do you stop? Do you lose the fire? Do you search for a new enemy? Do you keep your wound alive because without it you do not know who you are? This is why revenge is a dangerous fuel. It burns hot, but it keeps the person who hurt you at the center of your life. You think you are escaping them, but every move still asks, are they watching? Every win still whispers, will they regret it? Every improvement still turns toward the people who once dismissed you. That is not power. That is emotional debt. You need something stronger. A standard you chose deliberately. A structure that survives mood. A skill that creates value. Evidence that survives opinion. Allies built through reciprocity. Options that make desperation unnecessary. That is self-command. Self-command is not shouting that you do not care. It is continuing even when nobody reacts. It is doing the work when nobody praises the discipline. It is keeping the promise after the emotional high has disappeared. It is building proof without turning every step into a performance. It is accepting feedback without collapsing into shame. It is using doubt as pressure without making doubt your identity. That is the higher stage. Not please believe me, not I will prove you wrong. But this is the standard, and the work continues. So how do you better yourself when nobody believes in you? You stop making belief the requirement. You stop demanding credit for potential. You understand why familiar people update slowly. You turn isolation into structure. You build one measurable skill. You document proof. You build alliances from value. And you keep going until other people's belief becomes useful but unnecessary. The hidden mechanism was never motivation. It was dependency. The moment someone else's approval determines whether you act, they possess leverage over your future without even trying to control you. Remove that leverage, not through anger, through evidence. This is the brutal correction most unsupported men need. Nobody believing in you is difficult. Needing them to believe before you act is far more dangerous, because doubt from other people is external pressure. Dependency on their belief is internal surrender. One can sharpen you, the other owns you. If your family doubts you, build. If your friends misunderstand you, build. If the market ignores you, build something it can measure. If nobody applauds, build the kind of evidence applause cannot change. But do not hide behind the romance of being unsupported. Do not turn your lack of support into an excuse for lack of proof. Do not call yourself underestimated when you have not tested yourself against reality. Do not confuse pain with progress. Do not confuse isolation with discipline. Do not confuse potential with identity. You are not powerful because people doubt you. You are not special because you are alone. You are not automatically underestimated merely because nobody recognizes your potential. You may be underestimated. You may also be unproven. Stop confusing the two. There is only one useful way to discover the truth. Build. Maybe you fail. Then the failure gives you data. Maybe you succeed. Then success gives you leverage. Either outcome is more useful than another year spent demanding belief. Another year explaining the vision. Another year privately imagining the man you could become while publicly remaining the same. That is how time steals men. Not all at once, quietly, through evenings wasted after work, through vague goals, through unfinished projects, through emotional dependence disguised as loyalty, through resentment disguised as wisdom, through waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect supporter, the perfect confidence, the perfect environment. And then one day, a man looks up and realizes he did not lose because nobody believed in him. He lost because he made their belief the condition for his own movement. Do not become that man. Choose one thing you can prove in the next 30 days. Not explain, not announce, not fantasize about. Prove. One client, one project, one physical benchmark, one certification, one published body of work, one measurable skill, one piece of evidence, then build the next and the next, until you no longer need to tell anyone who you are becoming. Reality will tell them for you. This is how the unsupported man becomes dangerous. He stops asking the world to emotionally finance his ambition. He stops begging familiar people to see a future they have no evidence for. He stops resenting the silence and starts using it. He turns isolation into structure, structure into skill, skill into proof, proof into reputation, reputation into leverage, leverage into options, options into sovereignty. That is the transformation. Potential to proof, isolation to structure, doubt to pressure, skill to leverage, neediness to alliance, permission to sovereignty. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are not waiting to be understood. You are not waiting to be understood. You are not waiting for someone else's stamp of approval. You are building the evidence that makes approval irrelevant. So close the distance between the man you imagine and the man reality can verify. Close it with work. Close it with records. Close it with discipline. Close it with useful skill. Close it with visible proof. Close it until the old version of you becomes too expensive for anyone to believe in. Nobody believing in you is difficult. Needing them to believe before you act is far more dangerous. If you are finished waiting for permission, write 2 words below. Build anyway. Then leave the comment section and give the world new evidence.